Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spaniola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numinous Podcast, where we have interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mystery of life. I'm your host, Carmen Spaniola, joining you from the lands of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations, recently known as Victoria, BC, Canada. It's wonderful to have a genuine friend named Crystie Kisler with me on the podcast today. Crystie is the co-founder of Finnriver Farm and Cidery and is a mother, farm wife, and community networker in the Chimacum Valley on an organic farm located along a salmon stream on the North Olympic Peninsula of Washington. I've had the pleasure of experiencing Crystie's warmth and generosity in circles together, workshops together, and I could feel it in the atmosphere when I visited Finnriver on a trip for my son's 16th birthday a couple years ago. I'm super excited to return there on September 17th and 18th, 2022, when I'll be leading wheat weaving workshops and hanging out on the farm during the Jefferson County Farm Tour Days. You can go to my website events listing for tickets. I'll tell you, if I had a farm-based business, which I hope one day to do, I would use Finnriver as the model and the template. Now, where Crystie and I could probably spend forever talking and visioning and activating dreams together is where land-based spiritual connection and social justice meet, where business ownership and equity and advocacy intersect, where dismantling supremacy culture meets building a worthwhile and beautiful and delicious future. So this is a conversation between two white ladies grappling with what it means to connect to land you don't come from and how we might try to learn how to belong there. So Crystie, what identities do you lead with?
Oh, I've been thinking about this question. I lead, I think, with a place-based identity in my life currently. I feel like I'm a creature of Chimacum here on the Olympic Peninsula. I'm a person of this place. I'm a farm wife, which I think of as being married both to a farm and to a farmer. I'm a mother, teacher, community member. I was born and socialized as a woman and born and racialized as white, but I've been actively examining and kind of reconfiguring my relationship to those identities for a while. So that's a work in progress. I think I identify now as, I would say, anti-racist and anti-patriarchy. I identify as earthling, I think, but also as cosmic. I'm pretty interested in the extraterrestrial. And I think as like a friend, neighbor, community member. That's some of them to start. And wait, Carmen, I know you love poetry. And so actually when you first mentioned this question, there was a very brief Rumi line that came to mind. Do you mind if I share it?
Please do.
It's the line, you probably know it. It's the line, I am so small, I can barely be seen. How can this great love be inside me? And that line always just makes me feel like, you know what? I'm a small mammal.
You're just a little mammal.
I'm just a little furry mammal. with big love, full of big love.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, some of it.
We shared that in common, our love of poetry. I'm glad you brought it in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how long have you been in Chimacum? I didn't think you grew up there. And also, did you grow up on a farm? Like, how did you come to the land where you are at Finnriver?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I'm 51. I've been here now for the majority of my life, but that means about 26, 7, 8 years. So I was not born on a farm. I was raised by a very kind of cosmopolitan kind of mover of a mother. So we were in a lot of urban centers as a kid. You know, how I got to the farm was a sort of developing consciousness in my childhood and into high school of feeling unrooted. I used to think I was from another planet because surely, you know, this wasn't the right one. And so I felt sort of estranged in a lot of ways from a lot of the spaces I was in. And then I met my husband working in Yosemite National Park, where we were both working for an organization that did natural history kind of education with student groups. And he was raised on a farm. He's a fifth, sixth generation wheat farm family from Eastern Washington, and before that in the Volga River region of Russia. And so farming goes way back and way deep for him. And I sort of started to see what that looked like for him in an embodied way, this sort of earthiness, this rootedness. His favorite vegetable is a potato. It was a very grounding presence. And I just started to feel drawn to it. And together we kind of shaped our, desire and commitment to do a life of agriculture.
Wow, that's so wonderful that you connected with somebody who had the medicine that you've been hoping for a long time. And potato, I mean, I love that. I'm a big potato person too.
Is it actually a vegetable? Maybe it's not a vegetable. Tuber, whatever it is.
It's a tuber, yeah. The Volga River. So is he kind of like Bessarabian or something like that? Like some of the, is he actually Russian, or is there?
No, they are the Germans that Catherine the Great brought up to that area actually to farm wheat, and then changed her mind, or the next ruler changed their mind, and then they were sort of sent off. And I want to say that there's a whole community of them in Eastern Washington, and there is a name for that kind of ethnic
Yes.
group.
So my mother's father's side are Germans in Russia called Bessarabians, and came from the Wittenberg area, and yes, colonized what would actually now be Moldova, but exactly that, brought by the Russian aristocracy, colonized for about 100 years. And actually, this is, what's the test for how long does it take to talk about Nazis? Anyway,
right.
Did a lot of medical data gathering and testing on them to see if Germans who hadn't lived in Germany for 100 years were still ethnically German.
Oh, brother.
Yeah, isn't that wild? And then when they moved to Canada, they still identified as German, even though they'd been in the Moldova region farming for 100 years, multiple generations. So isn't that so interesting that
Well, it is. And what's also interesting is that I tell the story of Keith's lineage quite a bit. This sort of connection to, they brought wheat over and sewed in their coats and migrated across the country and settled in the Dakotas and then in Washington. But I didn't really have a sense of my own lineage past really my mother until the pandemic, when I don't know, second cousin something removed reached out to me, and she said, I'm tracing all the great-great-granddaughters of our shared Jewish-Lithuanian ancestor, Batya. And I was on her list. And so now I have a great-great grandmother to name, this Batya. And so I'm just sort of beginning actually trying to discern. So, when I think about identities, actually, I am trying to sort of, I'd love to name my sort of 5 or 6 maternal ancestors, if such a thing. That's sort of a gift in this world in terms of how people have been displaced from their ancestry. But that felt like a real gift to have a sense of some connection to Lithuania.
Yeah. Oh, that's exciting. I'm excited for you. How wonderful. God bless the people who reach out to strangers and say, I've done all this emotional labor for you. Do you care? It's like, oh my gosh. People on the internet, when they do that, I'm just so impressed. So, okay. So you have these identities, and they're here, in what you would call the Pacific Northwest, I guess, it's still under the umbrella, basically, is white. You're a white settler. And though Keith has been there for 5 or 6 generations, that probably brings with it a fair bit of tension, I would think, if you're anti-racist. And so how do you grapple with being white farmers on indigenous lands? Like, how do you incorporate that into your work if you're anti-racist, anti-patriarchal, if you're working towards incorporating justice?
Yeah, well, it's such a relief, really, in some ways, just to have you ask the question out front, because I do think that's it's sort of the great hurdle, and it's the great complexity, really, of sort of occupying, I think, the identity I do, or the identities I do. So yeah, I can respond to that a few ways. I guess first I'll say back to the sort of initial impulse to farm came from a sense that the relationship that I was sort of instructed to have with nature was that it was this kind of external force that you visited on weekends or when you went hiking. And otherwise, you had your sort of real life, and you kind of moved back and forth in or out of nature depending on your schedule or your your opportunity. And in our early 20s, both Keith and I started to see that that was somehow unnatural. It certainly didn't feel correct in our bodies, and it felt like it wasn't correct at scale because of the way this society that we inhabit was sort of disregarding what it was sort of naming as nature. And so reconciling that for us was this relationship to food, and the sense that food actually is nature. It has been sort of categorized as this sort of other thing you buy it in the store and so on, but it is actually like plant matter and animals and soil and water and minerals and light. And so we thought, wow, what if we pursued a life as farmers with the sort of intention of having that be our pathway to reconnection with nature, knowing that agriculture, had, in some ways was the great veering off from our sense of wild, sort of nomadic, kind of reciprocal, wilder connection to natural spaces. So knowing, and agriculture was sort of maybe it was a harbinger of colonization in so many ways. Is it?
Well,
Yeah.
and the surplus,
Sure.
the hoarding of surplus and
Yes.
things like that.
Yes. Yeah. So we came to agriculture with this sort of naive but earnest notion of we're going to use farming as our portal to reconnection with the land. We're going to help remind ourselves and those we feed that food is nature, and that I wouldn't have used the word reciprocal at the time, probably not as aggressively as passionately as I do now, until we've all read Braiding Sweetgrass, and Robin Wall Kimmerer is sort of really reinforcing that idea of reciprocity in a way that's sort of finally settling in to my bones. But that we would use food as this portal of reconnection. And so arrived full of ideals, and pretty soon, started feeling how big a task it is to become rooted in a new place. You really can't just plop down and belong. And I started to just sort of peel, or just really dig into what would belonging feel like here. And I realized pretty quickly, I have to understand what happened here. And you start asking that question, and especially in the Pacific Northwest, you don't go too far back before you bump into colonization and this sort of brutality and barbarism that was the sort of invasion of this
couple
landscape.
generations.
Yeah, not far back. So now what's really interesting about Chimicum, and at the risk of getting like too historical nerdy here in this conversation, it's a pretty complicated spot on the Olympic Peninsula. There are many sort of tribal nations and communities and family groups that have moved through the Olympic Peninsula as homelands, as trading grounds, as migration paths. And Chimicum, the community I'm in, was named after the Chimicum people. But if you looked at the Wikipedia entry, even 5 years ago, even a year ago, maybe, it would say, well, the Chimicum were all, I don't even know what verb it was, something terrible, lost, destroyed. Basically, that this is no longer a functional group of people. So you had to sort of start going outward. Well, who's our neighboring tribes? It's the Sklallam. We have the Jamestown Sklallam nearby, the Port Gamble Sklallam. There's also connection in this land to the Snohomish, because as cultures were displaced, they were moving, they were forced to sort of move into new spaces. So I started to, jump ahead. I started researching, where are we? What happened here? Whose land is this? And I'll just move ahead to say that's been a 20-year process. And it felt like becoming informed was sort of a first step, and that the next step was going to be becoming, developing actual relationships with people. And that takes time and trust building. And the outcome, or at least in this moment where it's at, is the Chimicum people are not gone. They're very much here. And the families that have been here are emerging right now with a collective voice to say, we're here. That's literally the message. And some local photographers just did a portrait project to catalog, to kind of capture their, catalog their photos, take their photos, and make an exhibition. And that exhibition is going to be at Finnriver, our farm, on Labor Day weekend. And members of those families are going to be here. We've been in discussion with them for months about how can our farm be a sort of haven for them and a place of comfort and support as they're emerging, as they're reclaiming their story, as they're making themselves visible. So now I'm really just trying to put myself in the service of that effort, and am learning a lot as that happens, because I'm hearing stories and I'm understanding more about the complexities and intertribal complexities and colonizer complexities. And so I could go on, but does that answer your question? Part of it?
Yeah. Well, especially the part that it literally takes decades,
Yeah.
like it's a lifelong question of
Yep.
grappling of how do we be here, and what is reciprocity? And like you said, you can't just plop yourself down and belong somewhere. That's different from residing there.
And to deepen it, because being in conversation with you, I feel like is an invitation to sort of deepen into sort of those somatic spaces. I would say that the reckoning that you asked about, like how do I reckon with being in a white body here, in a colonizer lineage here, I reckon with it through grief. I reckon with it through ambiguity. I reckon with it through confusion. I reckon with it through relationship. There's not a tidy answer for that. I think it is a commitment to sort of bear the grief of what's happened here and to figure out how to align with any kind of repair or healing that might be possible. And in that there is some resolution, but I'm certainly not expecting a sort of comfortable outcome. And so I guess I feel like I'm continuing to live with that discomfort, but trying to do so kind of with a sense of possibility for what's going forward, because also I'm learning so much about the disassociation that the sort of dominant culture has created for me with my body, with my community, with my landscape. And so there's this pathway to sort of learning and recovering a whole lot of wisdom, indigenous wisdom that's he has been here, is still here, and wants to be, I think, really the guiding light out of the, I'm not sure, probably shouldn't swear on the podcast, but out of the shit show that we're in. Yeah.
Well, what you're describing is the word that's coming to me is hospitality, and that here we are as uninvited guests. Yep. And now you are a landholder. And so how can we create an atmosphere of warm hospitality in order to create conditions where reciprocity may exist at some point, and it may or may not be returned. But I notice, having visited Finnriver once, that like hospitality is a really it just permeates everything. It's a very welcoming place. And a big part of Finnriver, of the experience there, is dining. And so how has your thought about food evolved? Like you kind of were telling, saying you were a bit naive, and it was like you're being a bit cheeky and describing like, we're going to, food is nature. So, clearly it's important to you, but like the dining, the customer service, the atmosphere that you've created, it really is a like hospitality forward kind of place. So why is that so important to you? Like, don't you have enough work to do just like growing grain and making cider? Like, what about this restaurant experience?
Yeah, thank you for that question, because it speaks to really the purpose. I don't think the purpose for us ever was just put food in people's mouths or just put beverages in their, down their gullet. It was always, well, actually, this is just an opportunity to share our mission. So the Finnriver mission is celebrate the beauty and bounty of the earth, reconnect people to the land that sustains us, and grow community. And we drafted that, with quite a bit of thought and soul, and sort of, it's been a touchstone, throughout the decades we've been building this kind of experience and this enterprise. But I would say the last bit, grow community, has been the one that continues to sort of reveal its depths and to reveal its challenges and its possibilities, because I sense that for sure was a fairly glib statement. Grow community, everybody's welcome. Come on, let's eat and drink together. And the longer time I've spent here, the more I've felt into the kind of the opening up of the heart, and the sort of offering up of sort of time and presence that's required to make a community possible. So Finnriver's intended to be a space where really that invitation is open, that work happens. We create, lots and lots of sort of cultural content that will bring, reach, I think, all different sectors of the community. And really the signature piece of the Finnriver facilities, if you will, is this old dairy feeding trough. It's like 75-foot long concrete trough. I don't know if you saw it when you came, but it was where the cows would sort of walk up and put their head down and eat the silage or the hay or whatever it was. And rather than knocking that over and putting in tables, we just ran table down the middle of the feeding trough. So you literally sit on it when you come, and you're sort of at this human feeding trough. And the idea was, this is a 75-foot long table. Let's put people next to each other. Let's create a physical space that actually is a metaphor for, we're all here together, sort of feeding off the same surface of the same planet. We're all eating the same elements. We're in this relationship all together. And I think that sense of kinship that you feel when you're eating together, it's something we wanted to sort of reinforce and nourish, And so food is nourishment, food is kinship, food is community, food is celebration. We really try and create opportunities for all of that to happen. And then, of course, the food, back to the sort of origin story, reminding people, when you put this in your mouth, you're eating that. You're eating the earth. You're eating the light. You're eating the soil. You're eating the sweat off the hands of the farmers. You're eating the life energy that they brought to it, that all the sort of elements of the land bring to it. So dining is, it's a fundamental kind of community building act. And we discover new things about how to do that in ways that will continue to be sort of more inclusive and more accessible and more nourishing. It's been fits and starts of sort of understanding and learning. And we also are trying to operate as a business. And so that bottom line of enterprise is sort of a kind of constant wrestling match. We became a certified B Corporation, which is companies that make a commitment to what they refer to as the triple bottom line of people, place, and profit. And you put this in your operating agreement. You go through a very rigorous accreditation, and you essentially write into your incorporation papers, we are not beholden only to the bottom line. We will not behave in ways that are always profitable. We will act as if people and place matter. And so that continues to sort of guide how we think about food and hospitality. Now, and to hospitality, Carmen, I feel like I'm just at the beginning of a study of what does radical hospitality look like? How do we reduce the transactional and up the transformational? And the human beings involved here day to day are the ones that make that transformation happen. And what it means to be a human being at work right now is complicated and somewhat sort of beleaguered after the pandemic. So we're also trying to recover from that.
So I have sorry, am I interrupting you? I have, how is this for you as a person who is as much cosmic or has been rootless and oriented off planet for a lot of your life? How do you bridge to the earth, and how have you found meaning, perhaps spiritual homecoming by being a a farm wife?
Yeah, such a rich question. The quest continues. It does deepen. Year to year, it does deepen, and it deepens as I become more familiar with the patterns of this landscape. The migrations of the swans, and the sort of flowering of the this, and the ripening of the that, and the way the light changes. So there's this thing that's happening to my body as it gets synced up to the seasonality of this place. I should mention that my husband and I were very profoundly informed by the work of Wendell Berry in our early 20s. And he's not in some ways, Wendell Berry's echoing something that I think of as very indigenous, which is this be of a place. You can't be in, your deepening of relationship to something happens through commitment and time and presence. And so we took his sort of urging and exhortation, like commit to a place, very, very seriously. Everyone who knows me knows it's hard to get me out of Chimacum. I have like a 3-mile loop that I do, day in and day out in this place. And so I'm asking the same question you are. What does it take to belong here? Staying here feels like one answer. Being in sensory relationship to the place, committing to getting to know my neighbors and continuing to expand who I think of as my neighbors, outside of whatever the kind of grooves are that you form naturally. And now that I'm becoming more of a student of reciprocity, trying to let go of sort of preconceived notions about what that means, and sort of have more of a beginner's, kind of like every day, a little bit of a beginner's attitude to belonging, because it's feels like there's quite a bit of baggage, that came in. I'm still tossing baggage. But Carmen, the other night, I'm going through menopause, everybody, and so I wake up in the night quite a few times. A friend told me to call them power surges instead of hot flashes.
Yeah.
And I am trying to make a point of saying the word menopause out loud, since it's
Yeah, for sure.
one of these hidden phenomena that's pretty significant. Anyway, I wrote this thing the other night about this. May I read it to you?
Please do.
I think it answers this question. This is in Scribble, so it's not been edited or reformed, but this is what occurred to me in the middle of the night. What will it take to belong here truly, to a land I was not born to, nor my parents or theirs or their ancestors? Once I've learned the timing of the swans, the names of the ferns, once I have tasted every wild berry, been covered by nettle stings, immersed myself in the sea, wrapped in kelp. What if I smeared semiahu muck all over my body? That's the soil type of this valley. What if I packed it in my mouth? What if I ate only from this ground, drank only snowmelt and creek run from here? What if my feet never left this land again? What if the birds knew me by name and my neighbors all waved? Is there any hope to belong here in this place? Will I always feel extraterrestrial, invader, delivered by meteor? Am I familiar here? Am I family? Do I know the words for home? Do I know the way here? Am I lost or foundering? Could I find my way through the forest by the direction of the wind and the smell of the salt? Is it morbid to say I feel like I'll only fully belong when I am buried here, when I have given all of myself back? Yeah.
Oh, Crystie.
Oh,
That was beautiful.
Carmen. Thank you. Oh, I thought you would like it.
Of course, I love it.
Oh.
You articulate, will I only feel I belong here when I'm back in the ground? That's yes, you have captured the essence of feeling rootless and displaced and invader, and that was gorgeous.
Oh, thank you for hearing me. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, I mean, I didn't, I woke up, actually, it was on the pillow next to me, and I was feeling grateful for my midnight power surge.
Yes. So you said that one of the ways you grapple is through grief.
And it sounds like poetry. Writing poetry is one of the ways as well. What are some of the other ways you cope with grief? And also, I'm curious with rage. Does Crystie Kisler get enraged? And if so, how does it come out?
Oh, well, I do now, thanks to menopause. So just to say that word again. Um, yeah, I guess let's start with grief. The real gift of grief work for me came from Joanna Macy in my 20s, the Buddhist sort of scholar activist who introduced me to despair work. And I think the key sort of treasure of that encounter for me with her work was, well, I used to experience, I sobbed my way through college because I was studying sort of environmental issues and starting to gain a social justice consciousness, so I would be out sort of sobbing quite frequently, and people would sort of pat me on the back and say, it'll be okay. Well, I was not comforted by that. I felt like it was sort of missing the point. And so when I got the copy of World is Lover, World is Self, and she said, look, despair work is actually the excavation of your heart to make more room for compassion. I was like, okay, that's a way to convert what I feel as despair into participation in, embodying compassion, or participation in the work of compassion. I guess the embodiment of compassion. So, I mean, that's a lofty aspiration. I often just sort of get despairing, but I hear her in my mind, and I visualize this excavation happening, and I think, okay, now there's more room to love. That hurts. Let me dig out more room. More room to love. I mean, this is making me sound like I'm a nicer person than I am. I'm not. I don't really. I mean, it's just. I hope I was just going to spend my whole life trying to figure out how to be human. I think to the rage part, there's been a lot more of that the last few years, whether it's hormonal or just the volume of information that's coming our way, the level of exposure that's at work right now in terms of the harm, and so rage, maybe more outrage, is what comes up. And I probably would have to talk to you about how to really manage that in a healthy way.
Oh, well, not the healthy part, but yes, talk to me
Yeah,
about rage. And,
outrage. Yeah.
we don't, the last several episodes of the podcast, we've talked about menopause a fair bit.
Oh,
And
good.
I do think that there's just like there's a time, right? There's a time and place for everything. And how wonderful that our biology tells us when it's time to become really like outwardly outraged and
Yeah,
to kind of be willing to risk a lot for our holy outrage.
that's right. And forgive me, you'll appreciate this because you're a word person, but I think of myself now as an agitator with ag in there. A farm agitator. I'm an agitator. And I have become, I would say, and I'm guessing anyone who I work with who happens to listen to this will nod their head. I think I've become more disruptive, in meetings, not to sort of, not for the sake of being disruptive, but for the sake of sort of asking questions and challenging, um, status quo and so on and so on. So I have the gift of being in proximity to a lot of younger, I would say, more radical thinkers, and so I have a chance to sort of echolocate off what they're bringing forward, what they're learning, the new language. And I would also say outrage is manifested for me right now as a new set of boundaries. What's that amazing Prentice Hemphill line?
Oh, my boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and myself at the same time.
Yes, that is that notion is changing the terms of some of my relationships, and I think that's outrage is sort of an indicator that I then sort of pay attention. I attend to and go, oh, is this changing the terms of this relationship? If I find myself consistently outraged by this or that dynamic or this or that situation or setting, or yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm so pleased to know you at this time in your life, though I think if we'd known each other 10 or 20 years ago, we would have bounced off each other really, really well, because I too had the, like, it is nice to be able to look back and be like, oh, that was a little altruistic, or like, oh, I didn't know as much as I thought I did. And then to come to a place where it feels really comfortable to not know everything, and to be learning, and like you said, be learning from younger people, and to be able to adopt new language, and at the same time be able to spend the privilege of a wiser older self on things that actually really matter and hopefully are going to have impact. So thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you for making me cry. That's just, it's so sweet. It's so sweet. It feels so good to cry to your words, Crystie. Thanks for being on the show.
Oh, I'm moved by your responsiveness, and it's always a joy to talk to you, Carmen, and thank you for the thoughtful questions and the fruitful conversation. Appreciate it. And looking forward to seeing you.
Looking forward to seeing you too. It takes a very exceptional individual to get me out of my 3-mile loop.
I understand that.
And then to like cross the sea, cross a border into America, I would only do it for people that are truly dear to me. So I'm really looking forward to hanging out and doing some ritual craft at Finnriver in September.
Amazing. Thank you. I feel the honor, and I feel the significance of the movement. So thank you. Can't wait to see you.
I know you want to read that poem again. So Crystie has generously supplied a draft, which you'll find in the show notes at numinouspodcast.com. I cannot wait to enjoy the harvest home season with Crystie and the Finnriver fam. As I said, you can purchase tickets online. It's the same workshop each day, so just pick your day and let's make it a date. I'll see you there. And if you come, post it on Instagram. Tag me on Instagram. I'm going to be on the ferry, and I'm very excited. So let us know when you're traveling there, and let me know who I'm going to be hanging out with. It'll be very exciting to see you. Listener shout out today. I can't help but notice that my listens in Ukraine are growing lately. And I don't know how that's happening, but I want you to know that I see you and I'm thinking about you. A lot of us over here on the west coast of Canada are still thinking about you and talking about you and holding vigil for you all. So it means a lot that you're listening, and I hope you can feel my heart reaching for your heart through the airwaves. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Finally, The Spirited Kitchen, my forthcoming cookbook, October 31st, available in stores, is now available for pre-order. And I highly recommend you purchase it now. Okay, for many reasons, but namely because it helps my publisher determine the size of the print run. And I would hate to run out at the holiday gift-giving season because suddenly there's like a big rush on October 31st, and then there's not enough time for them to get new copies into stores. So it like helps them gauge and plan ahead. So if you can, it'd be really good. It'd be so good if you would order it now. And you can go to my website and you'll see a bunch of the cookbook tab, a bunch of retailers you can purchase it from, and then you can just come back and submit your receipt. You just come back to my website, go to the cookbook page, and when you submit your receipt, you'll instantly get a download bonus. One of them is like an extended final chapter with over 300 magical correspondences, different ingredients, animals, deities, elements, medicines, plants, all that stuff, and what their spiritual significance is. So if you can, it'd be so good if you could order it now, and just go to my website, carmenspagnola.com, CarmenSpagnola. Until next time, take care.